Well, hello and welcome to the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling Keystone Virtual College Exploration. This program is a partnership between PACAC and StriveScan for all Pennsylvania students. My name is Liz Forsini. I'm a college counselor at Wyoming Seminary in Kingston, Pennsylvania, and I'm happy to kick off this session for you today. A few housekeeping tips before we get started. If you have questions for the institution and the panelists, please make sure to enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This session is brought to you today in a webinar feature, so your camera and microphone will be muted and off for the duration of the session. You signed up for this session today, so you obviously have had success in finding our program, but there's additional sessions located on our website from now until November 6th. There's also recordings for every session, including this one today, on our website. And both session registration and recordings can be found at www.pacac.org/virtual. And now I will turn it over to Reed College.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. And hello, everybody. My name is Duncan. I am one of the admission counselors here at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. And indeed, I am the admission counselor for the state of Pennsylvania. So if you're in Pennsylvania and you got questions, you can reach out to me and I will answer them, of course. I was also a Reed student up until very recently, so I'm very excited to spend a little bit of time telling you about Reed and what I think makes it special and unique for about 40 minutes today. And I'm just going to, the topics of the session. We're going to start with academics, going to explore some examples there, and then I'll do a little bit on student life as well as we near the end. And like Liz said, of course, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A and I'll be happy to answer them. So let me start with a bit of context. So Reed, in its most practical terms, is a small liberal arts college in Portland, Oregon. That means you get all the classic liberal arts features like small classes and good relationships with your professors, and of course, a tight-knit community. What I really like to emphasize about Reed, and that I think is important that people understand, is that Reed is in Portland, not just outside of it. A lot of small liberal arts colleges are just outside of a big city or in the suburbs somewhere. And while Reed isn't downtown in Portland, we are absolutely in Portland. And that means that there's lots of fun stuff to do very near Reed, walking distance or biking distance. Portland is a very bikeable city. And there are bus stops on every side of campus if you want to go a little bit further as well. In fact, when I tell people about Reed, I actually think that Reed students tend not to spend that much time downtown, not because there's nothing to do. There's actually quite a lot to do downtown, but it's just because there's so much to do on Reed's side of the city as well. In and around Portland, there's also amazing outdoor opportunities. We have wonderful parks, but you can also go a little bit further flung and you can go an hour and a half to the east and be in the mountains and hang out at Reed's ski cabin or go skiing or hiking or camping. Or you can go an hour and a half to the west and be on the Pacific Ocean, and you can go where you could learn to surf, or you could, again, go hiking or camping, that sort of thing. And they also have great crab shacks out there. And naturally, because all these amazing opportunities exist, Reed has a number of different ways that we help Reed students get out and about and take advantage of these opportunities. So one of the first ways that I'll mention Reed sort of cares for its students and supports its students is through the Gray Fund. The Gray Fund was a large donation given to Reed in the early 90s, and the stipulation was that it had to be used for fun things. So Gray Fund events range quite a bit from the smaller end is having a movie and snacks on campus. They might go downtown to see a concert. Sometimes they take students skydiving or go-karting, but they also sometimes do longer trips over spring or our fall break. So this is a great way that Reed is helping students get out and about. My roommate, while I was a student, actually went skydiving and now is determined to get their parents to go as well, which is very funny. And it's, I think, amazing that Reed has these opportunities. It's all based on a lottery system and it's totally free for students. So you put your name in a hat and hope you get pulled out, and then you can go on an all expenses paid trip skydiving, for example. And The Gray family gave this gift to the school because they understood how important it was to have this sort of programming to complement Reed's academics, which is what I'm going to dive into now and spend sort of the largest section of my session today talking about. This is because academics are important to us at Reed. We take our classes and our academics quite seriously, and I think Reed is a rigorous and challenging place, but that's not to say that it's rigorous and challenging for no reason. Within the rigor and challenge, I think Reed really supports students and pushes them to do work that they can get really excited about and to grow in a really authentic way. So to talk about the academic program at Reed, I'm going to use two examples that I think highlight this rigor plus care and support ethos at Reed. The first example is Humanities 110. Humanities 110 is the only course that's required of every single Reed student, and every single student takes it together in their first year. So it's designed as a writing seminar to give students an introduction to college level classes and college level writing. And in terms of subject matter, it starts off in the ancient Mediterranean with Egypt, Greece, Rome, Mesopotamia. And then in the second semester, you move over to the Americas and you study pre and post-colonial Mexico City, as well as the Harlem Renaissance. And in each of these places and each of these time periods, you're reading about poetry and literature and politics and art, you name it. It's a huge variety. It's the humanities, right? It's a big variety of things. And then to learn about these things, Humanities 110 itself is broken up into three components. The first is lecture. 3 times a week, the entire freshman class piles into our big lecture hall on campus to hear one of the humanities professors share their perspective on whatever is being studied that week. What's really wonderful about Hume and about Hume lectures is that those professors come from a number of different fields. So with 3 lectures in a week, you might hear about readings from the perspective of an art historian, and then a political scientist, and then an anthropologist, again, all in 1 week. And this harkens back to the idea of the liberal arts, informing your study with knowledge of a variety of different disciplines. But it might also be a totally different set of disciplines that you're learning about, which really builds up that knowledge, again, of a variety of different disciplines. But big lectures are an anomaly at Reed. And the second part of Hume is a conference style, which is a much more typical style of class at Reed. And it's usually about 15 students or so to a professor, which by the way is much closer to our average class size. And it'll be for an equal amount of time in a week as lecture. In these conferences, all 15 or so students and the professor sit around a table and talk about and discuss the readings that they've just done. They might also talk about the lecture that they just heard or something like that. And the professor is there to guide that discussion, but often the goal is for the professor to be speaking as little as possible. As the year goes on, Humanities 110 is a year-long class, by the way, the group gets to know each other a little bit better, and this discussion, the students get warmed up to this format of class, and the discussion that is entirely led by the students becomes more and more possible. As an example, again, I remember I mentioned that I was a student, and I remember back when I was reading the Iliad in my humanities conference, we started just by listing questions that we had that came up while we were doing the reading, and we put them up on the board in the classroom. And once everything was up there, the conversation flowed pretty naturally because we were able to point at stuff and say, oh yeah, I was also thinking about that, or that's a really interesting question. Can we talk about that? And the professor was able to sit back a little bit and just ask follow-up questions every now and again. And again, this really goes to show the idea of Humanities 110. It's getting these students more comfortable in this new environment while also learning about these historical texts and art, etc. But then the third part of Hume is less of a time commitment, but definitely not any less important. So again, Humanities 110 is a year long. Throughout the entire year, you'll probably write a paper about 7 or 8 times. And every time you write a paper in Hume, you meet with your professor to talk about that paper. Talk about what you did well and what you can improve on. and how you can expand on the ideas that you're exploring. We call this paper conference. And paper conference allows students not only to get really in-depth feedback about that one assignment, but also to get really close to this professor, get to know them. They get to create long-term goals and build a much stronger platform for mentorship than if you just got grades or comments on a paper. As a quick aside, if you're hearing this and it's sounding a little scary that you have to meet with your professor every single time you write a paper, I would tell you that pretty much only use first names here at Reed. There are a few exceptions, of course. Some people prefer to use their last names, but almost every single professor uses first names. So when I had paper conferences, they were with Patty, not Professor Riley. This is a really small thing, but it makes those meetings a touch less formal and a touch less intimidating. And again, it bolsters that mentor-mentee relationship. It also makes it easier to approach your professors later on down the line. Humanities 110 is the only class in which you're required to meet with your professors, but your professor is, of course, always there in every single class you take, and they're a fantastic support system that you will always have. And this whole explanation of paper conference and feedback brings me to another way that I think care and support are baked into Reed's academic program, which is our grading system. So at Reed, any assignment that you do, a Humanities 110 paper, a math test, or a biology lab report, comes back with written qualitative feedback rather than a number or a letter grade, and often quite a bit of feedback. So as a result, there's a common misconception that we don't have grades at Reed. We do have grades, we just don't see them unless we ask to see them. The idea here is to encourage critical thinking at every stage of the process and to give students a really active hand in their growth as writers and scholars. For example, teachers know that you thought about this Hume paper that you were just writing while you were writing it, but they also want you to be thinking about it afterwards. Again, they want you to be thinking about what you did well and what you can do better and how you can continue this train of thought when it comes to improving your writing and also the topics that you're exploring. I always tell students, your first paper might be bolstered, uh, ideas that you're exploring in your first paper might be really helpful in your final paper. So we don't want you to just get a grade and put the paper away. We want you to keep thinking about it, right? There's often this instinct if you get a paperback, I think, and you get a grade and you're like, oh yeah, like great, like I did fine on this, and you just stick your grade in your backpack and you never think about this paper again. And the idea is we want you to keep thinking about it and to really be conscious of how you're improving and how you're growing as a writer. So the result of this grading system is not only a more productive feedback process, but it's also a reduction in competitiveness on campus. Because students aren't asking each other, what did you get? They're asking each other, what did you write about? Or how did you approach that problem? And these conversations are therefore much more enriching, I think. And again, paper conferences from Hume are the only time that you're required to have these conversations with your professors, but you're always going to be thinking about your work and about the feedback that you receive. And of course, you're always welcome to talk to your professors if you want to. I said that you can't, you don't see your grades unless you ask to, but it's not like you can't. You can always ask. You don't have to do any arcane rituals to see your grades. You can talk to your professor, you can talk to your academic advisor, which every Reed student also has, or you could talk to the registrar. However, frequently, if you go to your professor and you say, hey, what grade do I have in your class? They will ask you right back, what grade do you think you have? But then students are also really quite good at guessing what their grade is, precisely because they're getting so much feedback and thinking on their assignments and about their personal growth on such a deep level. They really don't have very much trouble assessing their own work. So at the end of my time at Reed, I was really comfortable with this process and going to my professors for feedback rather than a grade. And I actually started going to them before assignments rather than afterwards, or sometimes in addition to afterwards. But the thinking there was that if I went to them before and started talking through my ideas, then I would be able to get a lot more out of the feedback because my professor would be able to see my entire process, which was a really cool thing to see at the end of my time at Reed. So Humanities 110, again, those are all the components of Humanities 110. After that, after your first year, you spend a little more time exploring and you pick your major. And then the third year hones in on your major even more. Of course, you still have room to explore, but you hone in on your major even more. And you conclude in something called the junior qualifying exam. This is because we want to make sure that students are really ready to write a thesis. Um, each department does the junior qualifying exam a little bit differently. But in many cases, it's actually not a test. It's not just like a sit down exam, but rather a process that really gets you ready to, you get to practice the skills for writing a thesis. And the reason why we're having you practice these skills and make sure that you're really ready is because we don't want to throw you in the deep end, because in the senior year at Reed, every single student writes a senior thesis. Full stop. Everybody does it. It's not just an honors college thing or an optional thing. Everybody does it. And it's a year-long independent research project that, again, everybody gets to design for themselves. Through this process, you really go from being a consumer of knowledge to being a producer of knowledge, because you can do it. You can do your senior thesis on any topic that you want. And that means that it can often be fairly niche or interdisciplinary. I like to give the examples of a physics student who in 2016 invented a new kind of musical instrument for his thesis. He was a musician as well, so he wanted to bring his love of music into his physics thesis. But of course, I also know physics students who wrote their thesis projects on like stuff like lasers, which is a much more traditional physics thesis topic. We also like to give the great example of a microbiologist who found a type of bacteria that eats plastic. I also enjoy the philosophy major who wrote his thesis on implicit biases and ethics. And he's now in law school, which is, I think, an excellent application of something that you learn in your thesis. But my point here is just to show you that the thesis project is really open and flexible, and it provides infinite possibilities. Some of you might be thinking, oh, I know exactly what I want a thesis on. And some of you might be thinking, wow, that is completely daunting. But A, don't worry, because you have your first 3 years to prepare for this, and then of course the junior qualifying exam. We do a lot of work to get students ready to write the thesis. And in addition, every student also has a thesis advisor, right? This is what I'm talking about with Reed's academics. It's rigorous, it's challenging, but not without support. So your thesis advisor is a professor in the department that you're majoring in, who is really well versed in the type of research or the topic of research that you want to do. They help you plan your thesis project, make sure it's something that you can accomplish in the space of a year and something that you are going to be really excited about for the entire year. And they also, provide resources and feedback throughout the year, that sort of thing. And the reason why I'm spending so much time talking about this thesis advisor is because this is a second time that Reed students get an entire year to build a really strong mentor-mentee relationship with a professor and get feedback on feedback on feedback. At Reed, it's pretty typical for students to meet with their thesis advisor for an hour a week, which is a lot of time to have one-on-one with a single professor. Just as a quick aside, I want to be extra clear that every Reed student has an academic advisor who is assigned when you first arrive on campus. They help you design your schedule and make sure you're going to graduate on time, all sorts of stuff like that. Your thesis advisor is almost always a different person. Sometimes they're the same person. It depends on what type of research you are doing and what type of research they are doing. But your thesis advisor is assigned or chosen when you start the thesis process in your senior year. So I just want to make sure that you have both of these support systems while you're at Reed. Seniors are also supported by spaces reserved just for them. I think this is a really interesting and kind of cool thing. Every senior gets a space just for them and their research. So for most people, this is a desk in the library where it's just yours. You can keep all your books there, and it makes a big difference. Trust me, when you know that there's a designated spot for you where all of your books are, it makes a big difference when you're going to the library. And then At the end of the process, we do another sort of ceremonial exam where every Reed student also does an oral defense of their thesis. But at this point, you are the expert in the room. You have just spent an entire year researching this topic, and you get to have a conversation with 4 faculty members about what you've been working on. And you can see this as sort of a ceremonial moment, right? Where students go from being that producer of knowledge, they go from being the consumer of knowledge to being that producer of knowledge that I was talking about a little bit earlier. And I think that's a really exciting thing that students get to do. And in addition, after that, your thesis is printed and bound and put into the library for posterity, right? They're put up in a part of our thesis, or excuse me, a part of our library called the thesis tower. It's where we keep every single thesis. You can get a few different colors if you want to choose the cover of your thesis. You can get red or black or blue. And I think that the fact that there is a room in our library dedicated to student work shows you that Reed is prepared to help students through this process and excited to value the work that students do and really willing to enshrine the great work that students do. For me personally, this was the room when I first visited Reed that really convinced me that I wanted to go here. All right, that was a fast run through of Reed's academic program. I'm going to take a drink of water, and if anybody has any questions, now is a good time. And then I'll jump into student life at Reed. All right. Well, keep in mind you can use the Q&A feature at any time. And let's jump into student life. So student life is also really important, right? Academics is not the only thing that you'll be doing in any college experience. You also learn to be your adult self, and you have fun and you meet friends. And I think that a lot of the care and support that I was talking about in the academic side of things at Reed is also present in student life. I think that I like to show this by emphasizing just a few things. Firstly, this is a small one. There's a huge variety of things that you can do at Reed. This is true at most colleges, and of course, you can create any club that you want if it doesn't exist yet. I often joke that I'm required to say that as an admission counselor. At Reed, some fun examples are Cheese Club. You could do improv or become a radio DJ. You could join our environmental club, which is called Green Board, or be elected to the Student Senate. Or you could even learn to operate our nuclear reactor, which is the only research reactor in the entire country that is run entirely by undergraduates. That's my point there, that there's just a huge variety of things that you can do. The second thing that I like to emphasize is that all of these things are totally inclusive. This sounds pretty small, but this was one of Reed's founding values, this idea that everyone should be able to take part in whatever they want to. This has 2 big impacts on our campus. It means that we do not have any varsity sports, and we do not have any Greek life. However, if you wanted to play sports at Reed, you absolutely could. Our sports teams play in the intramural leagues here in Portland, play against other schools and local club leagues, local club teams, sorry. And in fact, like our rugby team, for example, is actually pretty good. The thing is that anybody can join it, which means there's no tryouts necessary. If you want to join our rugby team, you can, and then you will be able to, you get trained up by the team and you'll be doing skirmishes in no time. This also goes for all of the other things that I was just mentioning. At Cheese Club, they bring Lactaid to make sure that people can be involved, even if they're lactose intolerant, for example. That's sort of a fun one. Or anybody can run the nuclear reactor. You don't have to be a physics major or a chemistry major or anything like that. You can learn it and be licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to operate this amazing machine. The other thing that I like to emphasize about student life at Reed is that I think Reed students are really willing to put in effort and work for their community. And I mean this in a very serious way. Yes, I mean that Reed students are really committed to holding each other accountable and making a difference in their community and improving it constantly for the better. Um, I think that they are really committed to making sure that people are heard and represented and supported on campus. Um, Another example of what I mean by this in a serious way is like the Student Body Senate, which I mentioned earlier, is a group of students who are elected to lead the student body. They help organize all the other clubs and distribute funding to those clubs, for example. But then they also are the main interface between the student body and the administration, which I just think goes to show that, when big changes are happening at Reed, students are really excited to be a part of that. And I do think that it's one of Reed's great strengths that students are so much a part of the college's various processes. However, when I say that Reed students are willing to put in effort and put in work for their community, I also mean it in a very fun way. So take Cheese Club as a first example. Cheese Club is entirely organized by students, and the entire idea is that they go out and they buy fun and unique cheeses, they bring them back to campus, and they will teach you about the cheeses as you try them. Um, Again, they also bring lactate, they've thought of that too. Um, every single step of this process is done by students. There's no faculty or staff involvement here. And indeed, they're not paying for the cheeses out of pocket. They pay for it via the student body fund. And that student body fund is distributed by students to the various clubs based on a poll that is sent out to students every semester. So it's decided at every level by students, is what I'm trying to say. Another fun example is something called our balls. That's as in Cinderella goes to the ball. And they are our dances that get put on approximately once a month in our student union. So they're all themed. So there was a Daft Punk one every year that I really liked. There's a pop music one. There's a early 2000s music. You name it. The themes, some of them are every year, some of them come and go. But what I'm wanting to emphasize why I'm bringing these up is because, again, everything about these events is student run. Um, Students are reserving the space, they provide the sound equipment, the decorations, the music, the cleanup, and the funding. All of it is 100% students. And I think that that really shows that students are willing to put in the effort and the work to have these fun events happen on campus. Um, yes, that is the end of my statement there. Sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm not missing anything. I hope you can see that care and openness and sort of a willingness to put in the work is baked into everything from Cheese Club to also, our grading policy. All right. So now, as long as nobody has any questions, which I don't see any popping up on Zoom here, um, I am going to spend a little bit of time talking about the application process and how financial aid works at Reed. But don't worry, I'm not just going to run through everything that's required to apply to Reed because I think you might have already a good idea of what is required, and also all of this information is available on our website at reed.edu/apply. But I want to share a little bit of our philosophy with you, and a few other key pieces of advice and information. So first off, Reed does holistic application review. This is pretty common these days, but what it means is that we read every part of every application. The centerpiece, arguably the most important piece, is your transcript, your grades, and your success in the classroom. That's what we really like to see. We really like to see that students are challenging themselves in their context. And for the record, what I mean by challenging themselves in their context is that, or an example of what this means is that no student is penalized for not taking AP classes if their school doesn't offer AP classes. Part of our job as admission counselors is to know about what your schools, know what the hard classes are and what the easy classes are, and assess whether or not students are seeking out those challenges that are available to them. But the transcript and grades, although important, are only one part of the application, naturally. And as somebody who is going to read these applications, I am really excited to get to know who you all are as people. And that's where the essays come in, and the letters of recommendation, as well as the activities list, and also the interview. Interviews are optional at Reed, but we encourage you to do them if you have time. So in all of these pieces of the process, I would encourage you to keep in mind that we are trying to get to know you. We want to read a little bit more information about who you are as a person. So to make myself a little bit more clear here, a common error in a college essay is to write a resume or essentially repeat your activities list. That would be writing an essay that sounds like, "Hi, my name is Duncan. I am in band and I'm in orchestra and I'm in yearbook, and here's why I want to go to Reed. Okay, great, thanks, bye." The problem with that is that we just read your activities list. Literally, it comes right before the personal statement when we read your applications. And so that doesn't tell us any new information. You can write your essays on truly whatever you want. That means if you want to write about something that's on your activities list, fantastic. Then a good idea would be to pick one and elaborate on why this thing is really important to you, and you know how it has changed you for the better, that sort of thing. But you could also write about truly anything else. You could write about an object that's really important to you or something that you do every day. You could tell us a story from your past. Although if you tell us a story from your past, make sure that you're linking it back to the you now, because we're not admitting a 10-year-old to college, we're admitting you guys. So this is my point. There's a huge swath of things that you can write about in order to teach us about who you are. One unique part of Reed's application is the paideia essay. This is our supplemental essay, and paideia is a Greek word that means education for education's sake, or like education in its purest form. It is also an event on campus every January where members of the community can teach a class on whatever they like. That means that we get a huge range of things, from a faculty member teaching you how to bake sourdough bread to an alumni telling you stories about Reed when they were a student, or current students teaching you how to make a terrarium, or about the death of Edgar Allan Poe. All of these things, by the way, are things that I have seen happen at Reed. The death of Edgar Allan Poe class was one that I attended and was really, really cool. So anyway, I'm digressing a little bit here. For the essay, we ask students what class they would teach, and why. And I would also encourage you to talk about how, because the essay is a great way for you to show us something else that you are really passionate about. It also is a chance for you to show us how you like to think and how you like to share these things with your communities. And that is a really fantastic way for us to get to know you as people and get to know what you're going to be like as a student on our campus and a member of our community. In the essay, or excuse me, in the application, there are also some optional components. There, you could send in an art supplement if you wanted to, or again, the interview is an optional component. But a conversation, that is the interview, is also one of the best ways we have to get to know you. And they're all online now, so I would encourage you to think about it. Again, you can sign up for them on our website. There is also a field for you to tell us about how COVID has impacted you. It's called the community disruption field on the Common Application. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want you to realize that you don't need to write another essay. It doesn't need to be a 650 word long thing. You can just tell us how it has impacted you. We will also be getting information from your schools about how it changed the grading systems and things like that, if at all. But if it feels necessary for you to tell us more about how it impacted you personally, then I would encourage you to use that field. And I also just want to make it clear that you don't have to talk about the pandemic in your personal statement, for example. You can, if you want to. If there's a story that is related to the pandemic that is really telling about who you are, then by all means, go ahead. But you don't have to. Another small thing, and well, it's not that small actually, an important detail is that Reed is test blind now. This means that we will not consider SAT or ACT scores as a part of your application. We feel that we can get all of the information that those scores would have told us through your transcript and the other parts of your application. And so we are not requiring it nor including it in our evaluation process anymore. All right, so that's all the information you need to apply, I believe. There are also a few different timelines for applying. November 15th is our first deadline. That's for early decision and early action. We also do a second round of early decision in December on the 20th. And then regular decision is January 15th for us. The reason why I'm bringing this up is not to urge you or push you to apply early or anything like that. Just to let you know that this is a really great way to demonstrate interest, to show you that you're excited about Reed. If Reed is in your top 5 and it's really big for you, but maybe you're not ready to make that absolute commitment, then I would encourage you to apply early action. You will get to apply to other schools and shop around a little bit. You'll also get to hear back a little bit earlier, which is wonderful. And again, it shows us that you are ready and excited to apply to Reed. Early decision does all of the same things, but you are also signing the early decision agreement, which is a commitment to attend Reed, saying, if I get into Reed, then I will come to Reed. Now, this is appealing, right? Because it's a great way for you to show us that you are going to be an active and engaged member of our community and that you are really excited about Reed. It makes our jobs easy, right? Because it's easy to be excited about students who are also excited about Reed. But I want to emphasize that that's all these are, a way to demonstrate interest and sort of your level of interest. There's no difference in how we evaluate applications. We don't have a select number of people that we admit early and then fewer in the regular decision round or anything like that. We're always just admitting you and evaluating your application by itself. And that goes for our financial aid as well. Let me explain how this works. So Reed is committed to meeting 100% of demonstrated need for all of our students, including international students. And that means that you'll fill out the College Scholarship Service profile, the CSS profile, and the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And then we'll know how much your family can afford to contribute to your application, and Reed will pay the rest. That award comes with a tiny sliver of loans and a tiny sliver of federal work-study jobs when they're necessary, but the vast majority of it is a grant that comes straight from Reed, and you do not need to pay back. All of this means that Reed students graduate with some of the least debt of any college on the West Coast, and it's about $12,000 less than the national average. And again, to just hop back a step here and explain, the way we evaluate financial aid is solely based on these 2 forms that you send us and your estimated family contribution. That means we are never comparing you to other students or basing your financial aid on when you applied or anything like that. So applying early is not going to result in less financial aid or something like that at Reed. All right. I think that is about all that I have to share today in my semi-scripted little session here. I am happy to take any questions at this moment. The other thing that I want to add before we sort of start closing out here is just that we admission counselors are very happy to talk to you at any time. We are resources for you. You can email us at admission@reed.edu. That's a singular admission, no S. And we will get your admission counselor to respond. Again, if you're located in Pennsylvania, that's me. And I am very, very happy to answer any questions about Reed or about the application anytime. Oh, we've got a question here. What did you write your senior thesis on? Thanks for asking that. I love to answer this question. So I was an art major at Reed, and I was really interested in photography. That was true going in to Reed, that is. But while I was at Reed, I also took a class on bookmaking, and I became really interested in artist books. And so I wrote my thesis on the intersection of those two things. I wrote about photography books, which is to say, sort of moving past the coffee table book into a more art realm. And I had a specific interest in artist books that were about families. And I wrote about how family is sort of a great subject to depict in that medium. And I have the thesis right here next to me, specifically for these types of sessions. This is what they look like. There you go. Yeah, thanks for asking. I can sort of relate that back to what I was saying earlier in the sense that, I was thesising and my advisor was a photography professor. And so I sort of blended his expertise with the expertise of another professor who worked on book arts, and sort of brought these two together. And we had a lot of really amazing conversations throughout the year, all three of us. And I think this is something that's very possible at Reed. You can make your thesis quite interdisciplinary. Yeah. All right. All right, Liz, if there are no more questions, I'll turn it back over to you to close out the session.
Thank you so much, Duncan, and thanks for spending time with the students in Pennsylvania today to learn about Reed College. For those of you who joined us live, there will be a quick 4-question survey at the end of this session. And if you'd like to sign up for additional sessions or view this recording or any others, you can do so at www.pacac.org/virtual. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.